Welcome to the Women Tech Council Student Innovator Mentorship Podcast Series. I'm Sarah Jones.
And I'm Sydney Tetro, and we are co-hosts of this show.
This show provides conversations with women mentors who came through STEM pathways and launched successful STEM careers. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to have a friend of mine, Trina Limpert, on the show today. Trina, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us about your career and what you do, and most importantly, what was your STEM degree, so that we can encourage these girls who are thinking about STEM careers.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Like Sarah said, we're longtime friends, and I'm really glad to be here. This is really exciting for me, and to be talking to everyone about something that's just a big passion area for me and has been such a long-term, wonderful career and had so much opportunity from it. So I currently work at eBay. I'm the Senior Manager of Performance and Strategy, and what that really means is I'm responsible for our development operations across our technology organization that all of eBay's call centers have a technology group that helps support them, and so we make sure all the software development goes out the door to support all of those people for eBay.
Well, and it's such a critical function. You were telling me earlier that every job that you've had has come from having a STEM degree.
Yes.
So, and you were getting a computer science degree, 20 years ago when it just wasn't the thing to do. Tell us about what that was like.
Yeah, it wasn't called high tech back then. It was computer science. And so I actually started my degree in engineering, so I've always had kind of a slant towards STEM. And I went into architectural engineering, and they had a course that was to do materials estimations. We had to program in Pascal, and nobody is even going to know what I'm talking about when I talk about Pascal. But that was my first programming class. And I was like, well, I can do this. This isn't hard. I don't know why, we just hadn't been introduced to it. And so I think that's the key, is just getting introduced to new things. And so I decided at the time that I was going to move into computer science, and was one of the best decisions I've ever made is to make that jump over to computer science. And, I had been used to, because of my engineering time, that I was the only girl in those classes. So moving over to computer science wasn't that hard. That was normal. So it wasn't that hard of a transition for me.
So I'm going to fast forward to where you are now. You've had a long, successful career. Of course, you're still super young, and you're going to be able to do so many more things for the next few decades.
I love hearing that. Thank you.
You're so young. So I'd love for you to think about, what is a career highlight that you've had so far that you just that you couldn't have had if you hadn't gone down a STEM degree route?
Oh, there's so many. It's like I look back, and every single position had this growth and things that I would never imagine that I would have had the opportunity to do. So one of my first positions out of my computer science degree was a network engineer at Novell, and I was responsible for a lot of the client server routing and the connectivity back then. And I was assigned to dedicated Fortune 500 clients. And so I had the opportunity to travel around the world and get to know and get to understand business and different types of business. So I supported Mars Candies. I worked with the New York Times. I had a few law offices. I had some banks. And it gave me a ton of exposure to a lot of different businesses that I wouldn't have had, even though it was all a technical role I was supporting. I learned a lot of business along the way.
I love that exposure aspect that you just talked about. I think one of the best things that young women can do for themselves is find a place that gives them lots and lots of exposure.
Yeah.
I think, back then it was a little bit hard, like you, right? Because our worlds were quite a bit smaller. And, but there are these opportunities that just give you rapid learning so quickly, right? If you can just position yourself the right way and take advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah.
What challenges did you face in your career? I mean, it doesn't even have to be gender specific, by the way, when I say this, but what is something that you were able to overcome and learned a lot about yourself from?
I think in trusting myself and continuing to be aware of when situations would occur where maybe I was being held back because of a bias or something. That's something I'm still learning to deal with, even to today. It's an awareness that recognizing when those situations happen. So I had a situation where I went onto a customer site and was working on a few of their issues they'd had with their servers. And later that evening had gone out with some of the gentlemen, and they'd had a few drinks and got a little loose and told me that their director had asked if they should keep me just fully based on I'd met him and shook his hand, and he turned around and asked if I should stay as their lead. And this is one situation where I was aware of it, but I had gone in. They said, well, she's been great on the phone, and I actually ended up solving a lot of their issues that day. And it just, for me, was reminding myself that, hey, I can make a difference, and I can help people, and having that confidence just to keep making an impact, improving yourself in every position you're in.
Thanks for sharing that story. It's always, for me, heartbreaking to hear, that there are these barriers, and you hit upon, I think, a really important concept, which is that awareness of when you're being held back. Yeah. How do you hone that and then champion for yourself, or how do you, or even find other champions? I mean, right, working yourself out of that type. I've also faced those myself, right? Mm-hmm. And so, sometimes I think I waited far too long. So what's your advice? I
think it's keeping an open mind that it's not always biased, that there maybe is something you need to work on too, right? Mm. And everybody deals with it. It's not just men or women. That there's bias in everything. And so when a situation happens, or you're not maybe getting the recognition that you would like, or you're not getting the promotions that you would like to see happening, it's really keeping an open mind of what's going on and having kind of stepping back and not allowing your emotions to get involved, but really stepping back and looking at the situation as a whole and say, okay, what do I need to do? And being able to go and talk to somebody about, hey, what's your feedback on this, and what's your perspective? And is this really something that is something I need to address directly, or is there something I need to change in myself, or is there something that I could start looking in different direction and do something differently? But I think it's just taking that time to reflect and kind of internalize it, and then make decisions from there.
Yeah, I like to sometimes tell people when they're faced with these hard decisions, sometimes I'll tell them, not everything is always about you. Right. And I think one of the hard things that we have as human beings is we can't read people's minds. Right? We don't know all the challenge that the other person might be dealing with on their side, right? And so, like you said, it's helpful to just find out or go through a discovery process first, rather than just assuming a bunch of stuff that may or may not be true. Right. And then figure out how do you problem solve out of that situation. But that discovery process, right, getting feedback is incredibly not only empowering but powerful, right?
Yes.
Because the more information you have. So I happen to know, Trina, that you are a mom.
Yes.
And that you have a few kids. And I'm sure there's one or two women in STEM listening to this that's interested in how do you integrate your work and life, and you also care about fitness, your own personal fitness, and so I mean that's a lot of stuff to have to juggle. So what does your life look like, Trina?
Oh goodness, we wouldn't have enough time to go through my life. But kind of the highlights is I prioritize. So there's certain things that I will do, and certain things I get help quite frequently. So I have 3 sons. Their ages 16, 14, and 9, my 3 musketeers. And then I have 5 stepkids, ages 23, 20, 17, 14, and 10. So that's like 27 kids if you do the math.
Yeah.
Right? But really what's interesting is, throughout my time as being a mother, I've always worked. I've been working full time since I was 15, so it's just part of what I do, and it's been a great part of my life. And I don't, sometimes they say it's an either or. It's not. It's an and. I am a mother, and I work, and I do a lot of things. And so for me, it's just a prioritization of what's important to me. My kids are important. My work's important. Sometimes they come in conflict, and I at those times, I decide what's going to be more important that time, but it fluctuates. And then also my fitness is very important to me. I wake up at 5 o'clock every morning, and I go to the gym for an hour and a half. I get back at 7 in the morning. I get my kids off to school. I get ready for work. I go to work for the day. I come home, and sometimes I make dinner. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes we just let them fend for themselves. But I do get help. So over the years, at times I've had a nanny. Sometimes I've had a gardener when I was a single mom. I was fortunate to have such a great career where it was like when I through those years where I was a single parent on top of working and kids, which I know a lot of people have that challenge, I was really fortunate that I had my work and was making the money I was making to where I could get help. Yeah. And I think a lot of people where they don't have that opportunity, that's a lot more challenging to go through those times in your life where you don't have that stability.
Well, and I think it's another nice reminder that for so many of our young women that are interested in having a family, they're always asking us, how do you do it all, right? Because they're so worried, and maybe the hidden secret, or maybe not so hidden anymore, is that it actually affords you a lot more flexibility than maybe some other career paths. Yep. And so now that that's becoming much more visible, I think a lot of women are paying attention and being like, oh, right, you can work remotely in a lot of the cases, or flexible schedules are so much more of an option. And even the concept of outsourcing, right? We used to take it all on ourselves, and I think exactly what you said, prioritization, right? Do some things yourself and then outsource the rest. Yeah. Right? Don't take it all on. It's not going to work.
Yeah. I think there's a misconception that, and I've heard this for a few women, like, I'm not going to take that job because it's going to require more time. I'm not going to take that promotion because I need to focus on my family or prioritize my family. What I think the misconception is that you'll probably have more time and more benefits to your family by taking the promotion. And so I think that's really important to look at that and figure out how do you still take on and push yourself and grow personally and throughout your career. And it does afford you even more benefits to your family by doing that.
Totally. And, every situation is going to be different, but in some of those cases, ask your partner to step up.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
There's got to be that flexibility within the whole support system. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. My husband's pretty awesome, and I've been really lucky. Like this morning, I got back from the gym, and he'd made all the school lunches for the 4 boys that were in the house that day, and there's little things like that, and there's other times where I'm just like, I'm not going to get to it, and it's okay. Yes. And he's fine with it, and be okay with it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing those tips and tricks. And as a final wrap-up question, I'd love for you to leave our listeners with their advice. Yeah. Why STEM?
Why STEM? I think I've hit on a few of these. There is a few reasons personally where I think in my career I've had more opportunity by going into technology, and I think that we sometimes have this perception that it's these people sitting in a room coding, and that's all that. When we say technology, I think it just narrows the field, and it really isn't. It's so much more broad than that. There are so many different positions that I've been able to have. I've worked as a customer service, as when I was a network engineer. I've worked in sales. I've worked in marketing. I worked in technology, and all of these in different roles. I've worked as analyst. I've worked in reporting. I've worked in so many different things that you wouldn't typically think about when we just think technology. And so it's such a much more broad set of career options than I think is really understood of what's out there. There's the fundamentals that they teach in academia on, basic coding principles that you need to have that lays the foundation, but that is not your career. I got out of my computer science degree, and I have coded very minimally throughout my career. And in fact, the jobs and roles I have are more design and implementation of systems and working with the developers. It's that I have that ability to understand the business and translate for the developers. And it's a completely creative and innovative, and to be able to know I've got millions of people using the systems I've designed is pretty cool. So I just think that it's this huge world that's just untapped, and just looking for everyone to be able to have that same opportunity like I did.
Trina, thank you for your advice and your wisdom and for sharing those perspectives. I think that they're hugely valuable. I appreciate your time for being on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for listening to the Women Tech Council Student Innovators Mentorship podcast series. Go to www.womentechcouncil.org for more info and subscribe to our iTunes channel for access to our ongoing series.